The cold metal floor pressed against Zarathus's knees as she knelt before the High Council of Kethmor. Her silver skin had lost its usual shimmer, dulled by weeks of confinement and fear. The chamber around her stretched impossibly high, its walls lined with the stern faces of her people's leaders. Their four eyes glowed with the harsh blue light that meant judgment was coming. Zarathus of the Northern Territories, the chief counselor's voice echoed through the vast space. You stand accused of the most serious crime against our people. Unauthorized reproduction with a member of the lower genetic class. How do you answer? She kept her head down, her hands resting on her still flat stomach. Inside, she could feel the tiny spark of life growing. Her child. Dexran's child. The thought of him made her heart ache with fresh pain. They had executed him 3 days ago, right after they discovered their secret. I answer that I loved him, she whispered, her voice barely carrying in the huge room. A wave of disgusted clicks and hisses filled the air. The Velthari had no word for love as humans understood it. They had duty, genetic compatibility, and breeding assignments. But love? That was a weakness they had bred out of themselves long ago. Love. The chief counselor repeated the word like it tasted bad. You speak of this primitive emotion as if it matters more than the purity of our race. Your genetic line is among the finest on Kethmor. Dexran was marked as inferior stock. The mixing of such bloodlines threatens everything we have built. Zarathus finally looked up, meeting the chief counselor's cold gaze. He was kinder than any of the approved males you offered me. He made me laugh. He held me when I cried over my brother's death. How is that inferior? Another council member stood, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. Emotional attachment is a disease, young one. It clouds judgment and weakens resolve. Your brother died in service to our military because he followed orders without question. That is strength. Your attachment to this Dexran is exactly why such pairings are forbidden. She wanted to argue, to tell them that Dexran had shown more courage in one day than most of them had in their entire lives. He had worked in the deep mines, risking his life daily to extract the crystals that powered their ships. He had saved 3 children from a tunnel collapse, even though helping others outside his work assignment was against regulations. But she knew they would not listen. The sentence has been decided, the chief counselor announced. Zarathus, you are hereby stripped of citizenship. Your genetic material is corrupted and your offspring, should it survive, represents a threat to our racial purity. You will be placed in an exile pod with basic life support and launched beyond our borders. May the void have mercy on your twisted soul. 2 guards moved forward, their hands gentle but firm as they lifted her to her feet. As they led her away, she heard one council member say to another, "At least the inferior male is already dead. That problem is solved." The hours that followed blurred together like a nightmare. They gave her simple gray clothes, a few food rations, and a container of water. The medical officer who checked her vital signs for the journey looked away when she tried to meet his eyes. Even he, someone she had known since childhood, could not bear to face what they were doing. The exile pod was barely large enough for one person. It had a small sleeping area, basic waste facilities, and a control panel that would only accept input for emergency signals. She could not steer it or choose her destination. The pod would drift wherever the solar winds and gravity. Wells took it. As they sealed her inside, Zarathus pressed her hand against the small window. Outside she could see Kethmor's twin moons hanging in the purple sky. She had been born under those moons. Her family had lived on this world for 1,000 generations. Now she would die among the stars, alone except for the tiny life growing inside her. The pod shook as it launched, pushing her back against the wall. Through the window she watched her homeworld grow smaller and smaller, until it was just another point of light in the darkness. Then even that disappeared as the pod's trajectory carried her away from everything she had ever known. Days passed, in silence. The pod's computer spoke to her in the same emotionless voice used throughout Velthari society, giving her updates on life support, position, and the slow countdown of her remaining supplies. She ate little, saving food for the baby, though she knew it would not matter in the end. The pod had enough supplies for perhaps a month. After that, both she and her child would quietly fade away in the cold between stars. She spent hours talking to the baby, telling it about its father. He had the most beautiful laugh, she whispered, her hand on her stomach. It sounded like the wind chimes in the market square, and his eyes were so bright when he looked at me. He said I was worth any risk, worth any punishment. I hope you have his eyes, little one. I hope you would have had his brave heart. The pod's sensors detected no ships, no planets, no signs of life. It drifted through empty space, a tiny metal shell carrying the last remnants of a forbidden love. Sometimes Zarathus dreamed that Dexran was with her, holding her hand and telling her everything would be fine. But she always woke to the reality of cold metal and recycled air. After 3 weeks, the first systems began to fail. The heater struggled to maintain temperature. The air recycler made strange noises. The water reclamation unit produced liquid that tasted increasingly stale and bitter. Soon, very soon, it would all stop working entirely. She had made peace with dying. But the thought of her child never having a chance at life filled her with grief so deep it felt like drowning. This baby represented everything good about her relationship with Dexran. It was proof that love, real love, could exist even in a society that tried to destroy it. As she drifted off to sleep on the 24th day, Zarathus whispered one last prayer to whatever forces might be listening in the vast darkness. "Please," she said, "if there is any kindness left in this universe, let my child live. Let someone somewhere understand that love is not a weakness. Let this little life have a chance to prove that we were right to choose each other." The pod continued, its silent journey through space carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain fate. Captain Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the navigation display for the 100th time that morning. The cargo run to Haven Colony was routine, but something about deep space always kept him on edge. Maybe it was the way the stars looked so cold and distant, or maybe it was the knowledge that help was days away if anything went wrong. "Captain, I'm picking up something weird on the scanners," called out Katie Walsh from the navigation station. Her red hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she had that focused look she got when the instruments showed her something unusual. Jake walked over to her station, his boots making soft sounds on the metal deck of the New Horizon. "What kind of weird? Small object artificial? About 200,000 kilometers off our port side. It's drifting, no power signature except for minimal life support." Katie adjusted the controls, bringing up a clearer image on the main screen. "Jake, that's not human tech." The object that appeared on screen was sleek and silver, shaped like a teardrop with strange symbols carved along its sides. It was beautiful in an alien way, but something about it seemed sad and lonely, floating there in the emptiness. "Life support, you said?" Jake asked, feeling his pulse quicken. "Barely. Whatever's in there, it won't last much longer." Sam Rodriguez looked up from the engineering console where he had been running diagnostics. His dark eyes were serious behind his glasses. "Captain, we don't know what that thing is or what might be inside it. Could be dangerous." Dr. Lisa Carter emerged from the medical bay, drawn by the conversation. She was a small woman with graying brown hair, but her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen everything the galaxy could throw at a person. "Could also be someone who needs help," she said simply. Jake stared at the alien pod on the screen. Everything in his training told him to report the find to Earth Command and let them handle it. But his gut told him something different. The pod looked desperate somehow, like a message in a bottle cast into an ocean with no shores. "How long until the life support fails?" he asked. Katie checked her readings. "Hard to say exactly with alien tech, but based on the power levels, maybe 6 hours, could be less." "Captain," Sam said again, "if we bring that thing aboard and it contains some kind of weapon or disease, then we'll deal with it," Jake cut him off. "But I won't let someone die out there just because they're not human. Lisa, can you prepare the cargo bay for quarantine procedures?" "Already on it," she replied, heading back to gather her equipment. 20. Minutes later, they had the alien pod secured in the cargo bay behind a force field. Jake stood with his crew, all of them wearing protective suits, as Lisa ran her medical scanners over the pod's surface. "Definitely a life form inside," she reported. "Humanoid, but with some significant differences. Appears to be female based on body structure and—" She paused, checking her readings again. "I think she's pregnant." That changed everything. Jake felt something twist in his chest at the thought of an expectant mother dying alone in space. "Can you get it open safely?" Lisa studied the pod's sealing mechanism. "The design is actually pretty intuitive. I think this external panel is an emergency release." She pressed several symbols in sequence, and the pod hissed as it began to open. The first thing Jake noticed was the smell, a clean, ozone-like scent that reminded him of the air after a thunderstorm. Then he saw her. The alien woman was unconscious, her silver skin pale and dry. She was tall and thin, with features that were almost human, but not quite. Her face was narrow, her eyes larger than a human's would be, and she had 4 arms instead of 2. She wore simple gray clothing that did nothing to hide the small but noticeable curve of her pregnant belly. "She's dehydrated and malnourished," Lisa said, running her scanners over the woman's body. "But alive. We need to get her to the medical bay immediately." As they carefully moved her from the pod, the alien woman's eyes fluttered open. They were a deep purple color, beautiful but filled with terror. She saw the humans surrounding her and tried to scramble backward, her 4 hands pressing against her stomach protectively. "Easy," Jake said, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "We're here to help." She said something in a musical language none of them understood, her voice weak but desperate. Then she seemed to realize they could not understand her, and her face crumpled with despair. Lisa slowly approached, holding a water container. She mimed drinking and offered it to the alien woman. After a moment of hesitation, the woman accepted it, drinking deeply and gasping with relief. "Do we have any way to communicate with her?" Jake asked. Katie had been working on her tablet while they talked. "The computer is analyzing her speech patterns. We might be able to set up a basic translation program, but it'll take time." The alien woman struggled to sit up, pointing at herself and saying something that sounded like Zarathes. Then she pointed at her belly and said another word, softer and full of love. "I think she's telling us her name," Lisa said. "And maybe talking about her baby." Jake knelt down slowly, making sure to move carefully so he would not frighten her. "I'm Jake," he said, pointing to himself. "This is Lisa, Katie, and Sam." He gestured to each crew member in turn. Zarathes, if that was indeed her name, repeated the names quietly, as if trying to memorize them. Then she looked directly at Jake and said something longer, her voice full of emotion. "Translation. Software's getting better," Katie reported. "I think she just said something like, 'Thank you for not letting me die.'" The simple gratitude in those words hit Jake harder than any weapons fire he had ever faced. This woman, alone and pregnant, and cast out into space, was thanking them for basic human decency. "Can you tell her she's safe now?" he asked Katie. The computer produced a series of musical sounds, and Zarathes's eyes widened. She responded quickly, and the translation came back as, "Are you going to hurt my baby?" Jake felt something break inside his chest. What kind of life had this woman lived that her first concern was whether they would harm her unborn child? "Tell her no," he said firmly. "Tell her we protect mothers and babies. Tell her she and her child are both safe here." As the translation played, Zarathes began to cry, not the harsh sobs of despair, but the quiet tears of someone who had given up hope and suddenly found it again. She pressed her 4 hands to her face, her whole body shaking with relief. Lisa gently helped her to her feet. "Let's get you to the medical bay," she said, knowing the woman could not understand but hoping her tone would convey kindness. As they walked slowly through the corridors of the New Horizon, Jake noticed how Zarathes looked around with wonder. She stared at the family photos the crew had taped to the walls, at the handmade decorations Katie had hung in the common areas, at all the small touches that made the ship feel like home rather than just a machine. When they reached the medical bay, Lisa helped Zarathes onto the examination table, and began running gentle scans. The alien woman watched everything with careful attention, as if trying to understand these strange beings who had pulled her from the edge of death. Scans show both mother and baby are healthy, Lisa reported. Dehydrated and undernourished, but nothing that proper care won't fix. Jake watched as Lisa offered Zarathus some simple food, bread and soup that seemed to be the first real meal she had eaten in weeks. The way she ate so carefully, making sure not to waste a single drop, told a story of recent hunger and fear. "Captain," Sam said quietly, "what do we do now? We can't exactly drop her off at the next space station. No one's going to know how to take care of an alien, especially a pregnant one." Jake looked at Zarathus, who was now resting with one hand on her belly and the other clutching the cup Lisa had given her like it was the most precious thing in the universe. "Then I guess we learn," he said. 3 days had passed since they rescued Zarathus, and the new horizon felt different somehow. Jake couldn't put his finger on it, but the ship seemed warmer, more alive. Maybe it was the way his crew had thrown themselves into caring for their unexpected guest, or maybe it was Zarathus herself, who brought a quiet grace to everything she did. The translation program had improved dramatically. Zarathus was incredibly smart and had quickly learned to work with the computer to build a better understanding between them. Now they could have real conversations, though some concepts still got lost between their very different worlds. Jake found her in the observation lounge, sitting by the large window that looked out into space. She spent a lot of time there, her 4 hands resting on her growing belly as she watched the stars. She wore one of Lisa's spare shirts now, which was too big for her, but somehow looked elegant anyway. "How are you feeling today?" Jake asked, as he sat down beside her. "Better," she replied, though the translation program still gave her voice a slightly mechanical quality. "Dr. Lisa says the baby is growing well, but I have questions." "What kind of questions?" Zarathus turned to look at him with those deep purple eyes. "Why did you save me? Your people did not know me. I could have been dangerous. My people would not have taken such a risk for a stranger." Jake thought about how to answer that. "I guess because it was the right thing to do. You needed help and we could help you, that's enough." "The right thing," she repeated slowly. "In my culture, right and wrong are determined by genetic value and social order. What you call right has no logical basis." "Maybe not logical," Jake agreed. "But it feels right in here." He tapped his chest over his heart. She studied him for a long moment. "You humans are very strange. Dr. Lisa told me about her family yesterday. She said she has a daughter who is not related to her by blood, but whom she loves as if she were born from her own body. This makes no sense to my people." "Tell me about your people," Jake said gently. Zarathus was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was sad. "We are Velthari. We conquered death and disease 1,000 years ago through genetic perfection. Every child is planned, tested, improved before birth. Emotion is weakness. Love is disease. Order is everything." That sounds lonely. I thought so too. That is why I chose Dexran. Her voice grew softer when she said the name. "He was classified as genetically inferior, but he made me laugh. He held me when I cried. He said I was beautiful even when I felt ugly inside. My people killed him for loving me." Jake felt anger rise in his chest, hot and fierce. "They killed him for loving you?" "Love is forbidden between genetic classes. Our children would have corrupted the bloodline." She placed her hands protectively over her belly. "This baby is the last piece of him I have. That is why they exiled me. They wanted both of us to die." "Well, they were wrong," Jake said firmly. "Love isn't a disease, it's what makes life worth living." Sam Rodriguez appeared in the doorway carrying a tablet and looking excited. "Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to show Zarathus something." He sat down across from them and turned the tablet so she could see the screen. "These are pictures of my family." The first image showed Sam with a little girl who had dark hair and bright eyes. She was laughing as he pushed her on a swing. "This is my daughter Elena," he said with obvious pride. "She looks like you," Zarathus observed. "Actually, she's not my biological daughter," Sam explained. "My sister died in an accident when Elena was 3. I adopted her because she needed a father and I needed her to be my daughter. Now I can't imagine life without her." Zarathus stared at the picture for a long time. "You chose to become her father, even though she was not your genetic offspring?" "Biology doesn't make a family," Sam said simply. "Love does." Katie Walsh joined them, carrying a cup of tea for Zarathus and settling into the remaining chair. "Are we showing family pictures? I want to share mine too." She pulled up images on her own tablet. The first showed an elderly woman surrounded by at least 20 children of various ages and ethnicities. "This is my grandmother. She took in foster kids for 40 years. Look at all these faces. Every one of them found a home with her even, though none of them were related to her by blood." "I do not understand," Zarathus said, but she was studying the image intently. "Why would she take care of children that were not hers?" "Because they needed someone to love them," Katie replied. "My grandmother used to say that the world has enough people making babies, but not enough people making families." Dr. Lisa appeared with her medical scanner, but she paused when she saw the pictures. "Family photos? I have some good ones too." She showed an image of herself with a young woman who had Lisa's smile but completely different features. "This is my daughter Carmen. I found her in a refugee camp when she was 8. She was so scared and thin but so brave. Now she's studying to be a doctor like me." "You all chose your families," Zarathus said slowly, as if the concept was hard to grasp. "This is normal for humans?" "Pretty normal," Jake confirmed. "We believe that family is about who chooses to love and care for each other, not just who shares the same DNA." Zarathus was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. Finally, she looked up at them with something like wonder in her eyes. "On my world, I was considered corrupted for loving someone of a lower genetic class. Here you would say I was simply choosing my family." "Exactly," Lisa said, running her scanner over Zarathus to check on the baby. "And now you're part of our family too, if you want to be." "I want to understand more about human families," Zarathus said. "Dr. Lisa, you mentioned something called a baby shower yesterday. What is this?" Lisa smiled. "It's a celebration when someone is going to have a baby. Friends and family come together to give gifts and support to help the new mother prepare. We shower her with love and helpful things. People give gifts to someone they are not related to." "All the time," Katie laughed. "Especially for babies. Humans love babies, even ones that aren't ours." Sam nodded enthusiastically. "When Elena was born, my neighbors brought food for 2 weeks. They bought clothes and toys and offered to babysit. Some of them barely knew me, but they wanted to help because that's what you do for new parents." Zarathus touched her belly, thoughtfully. "In my culture, pregnancy is a private matter handled by medical professionals. The mother is isolated to prevent contamination. There is no celebration, no community support." "That sounds terrible," Lisa said with genuine sympathy. "Having a baby should be joyful. It's one of the most important things that can happen to a person." Could I have a baby shower?" Zarathus asked hesitantly. "Even though I am not human?" The crew exchanged glances, and Jake saw the same emotion on all their faces that he felt in his own chest. Fierce protectiveness and love for this brave woman who had lost everything but still wanted to learn about hope. "Of course you can," Lisa said warmly. "We'll throw you the best baby shower this ship has ever seen." "But I have no gifts to give in return," Zarathus protested. "That's not how it works," Katie explained gently. "Baby showers aren't about getting something back. They're about celebrating new life and making sure you know you're not alone." Zarathus began to cry again, but these were different tears than the ones she had shed when they first rescued her. These were tears of gratitude and amazement, the tears of someone discovering that the universe could be kinder than she had ever imagined. "You humans," she said. wiping her eyes with all 4 hands. You make no logical sense at all. Thank you, Jake said with a grin. We'll take that as a compliment. As the group continued sharing stories and pictures, Jake noticed how Zarathes was changing. She was still cautious and sometimes confused by human customs, but there was a lightness to her now that hadn't been there before. She was learning to hope again, learning to believe that her child could have a future filled with love instead of cold logic. And watching his crew embrace this alien woman and her unborn baby with such open hearts, Jake felt proud to be human. Maybe they weren't the most advanced species in the galaxy. Maybe they didn't have perfect genetic engineering or flawless technology. But they had something that seemed even more valuable: the ability to look at a stranger and see family, to choose love over fear, and to believe that every life was worth protecting. That night, as Jake made his final rounds of the ship, he found Zarathes still in the observation lounge. But now she wasn't alone. Lisa was there with her, showing her pictures of baby clothes on a tablet and discussing what colors might work best. They were planning a nursery for a child who wasn't even born yet, making lists of supplies they would need to pick up at the next station. It was the most human thing Jake had ever seen. 2 mothers, 1 human, and 1 alien, bonding over the universal experience of preparing for new life. And somehow he knew everything was going to be just fine. The alert klaxon shattered the peaceful morning routine aboard the New Horizon. Jake bolted upright in his captain's chair, instantly alert, as Katie's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain to the bridge immediately. We have a big problem. Jake arrived to find his crew clustered around the sensor displays, their faces grim. On the main screen loomed a ship unlike anything he had ever seen, massive, angular, and radiating menace from every line of its alien design. Velthari warship, Katie reported, her voice tight with tension. Just dropped out of hyperspace and is closing fast. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. What are they saying? Sam worked frantically at the communications console. Translation: Coming through now, Captain. They're demanding we return their escaped criminal immediately. Jake felt ice form in his stomach. Zarathes had told them her people might come looking for her, but somehow he had hoped they would be safe in the vast emptiness of space. He had been wrong. Where is Zarathes? Medical bay with Dr. Carter, Sam replied. Should I get her? Not yet. Let me talk to these people first. Jake straightened his shoulders and tried to project calm authority he didn't feel. Open a channel. The main screen shifted to show a tall, silver-skinned alien in elaborate military dress. His 4 eyes glowed with cold blue light, and his expression held the same emotionless arrogance Jake had come to associate with bureaucrats and bullies. I am Admiral Kesavaro of the Velthari Imperial Navy, the alien announced. You are harboring a criminal exile and her contaminated offspring. Surrender them immediately, and you will be permitted to continue your journey unharmed. I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the independent vessel New Horizon, Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. The woman you're referring to is under our protection. She's committed no crime against us or our people. The Admiral's expression didn't change, but somehow he managed to convey even greater contempt. Your primitive understanding of crime is irrelevant. The exile Zarathes violated genetic purity laws and carries corrupted genetic material. She and her spawn must be eliminated to protect the integrity of our species. Eliminated? Jake felt. Anger surged through him. You're talking about murdering a pregnant woman. I am talking about necessary biological sanitation, Kesavaro replied coldly. Your emotional attachment to inferior life forms is precisely the weakness that keeps humanity in the lower tiers of galactic civilization. Sam muttered something, under his breath, that the translation system mercifully didn't pick up. Jake held up a hand for silence, never taking his eyes off the Velthari Admiral. Zarathes is under our protection, he repeated firmly. We won't be handing her over to anyone. Then you choose death. Kesvarod's image disappeared, replaced by targeting displays showing the Velthari ship locking weapons onto the New Horizon. Katie was already working her console, pulling up tactical information that made Jake's heart sink. Captain, that Ship outguns us by a factor of at least 20. Their shields could probably absorb our entire arsenal without taking damage. Time to human space? 18 hours at maximum speed. They'll catch us long before we reach the border. Jake stared at the tactical display, his mind racing through options that all seemed to lead to the same conclusion. The smart move, the logical move, would be to hand over Zarathes and save his crew. But every instinct he had as a human being rebelled against that choice. "Captain," Sam said quietly, "we could contact Earth Command, request immediate assistance. Help wouldn't arrive for days and they might not send it anyway. One alien woman isn't worth risking a war over, at least not according to the politicians." Jake turned to face his crew. "I need to be straight with you all. If we protect Zarathes, we're probably going to die. If we hand her over, she and her baby will definitely die. I know what I want to do, but I won't make that choice for you." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Jake watched his crew's faces, seeing them wrestle with the same impossible decision he faced. Katie was the first to speak. "My grandmother didn't turn away kids just because it was dangerous or difficult. She said every child deserves someone willing to fight for them." Sam nodded grimly. "Elena is going to grow up in a galaxy full of different species. I want her to live in a universe where people protect each other, not hand each other over to be murdered." Dr. Lisa's voice came over the intercom from the medical bay. "Captain, I've been listening to the bridge communications. Zarathes is crying, but she says she understands if you need to give her up to save yourselves. She's grateful for the kindness you've already shown her." There was a pause. "I became a doctor to save lives, Jake. All lives. I'm not stopping now." Jake felt something tight in his chest loosen. He had the best crew in the galaxy. "All right then," he said, settling back into his captain's chair. "Katie, plot a course for human space, maximum speed. Sam, see if you can squeeze any more power out of the engines. We're going to run." The next few hours were a nightmare of tension and desperate calculations. The Velthari ship was faster and more powerful, but the New Horizon was smaller and more maneuverable. Jake used every trick he had learned in 20 years of space travel, skimming close to asteroid fields and using gravity wells to mask their energy signature. But it wasn't enough. Slowly, steadily, the enemy ship gained on them. 12 hours. "To human space," Katie reported, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool air recycling. "They'll be in weapons range in 3 hours. Zarathes appeared on the bridge, her face pale but determined. She had to hold onto the wall to keep her balance as the ship shook from another course correction. "Captain Morrison, I must speak with Admiral Kesevarot." "Absolutely not," Jake said immediately. "Please, I know these people, I know how they think. Let me try to reason with them. Zarathes, they want to kill you and your baby. There's no reasoning with that." She moved carefully to the communications console, her 4 hands dancing over the controls with surprising familiarity. "Perhaps not, but I must try. Too many good people have already risked their lives for me." Before Jake could stop her, she had opened a channel to the Velthari ship. Admiral Kesevarot's image appeared on screen, his expression shifting from cold arrogance to something approaching shock when he saw her. "Zarathes, so you have survived your exile. How disappointing." "Hello, Kesevarot," she replied calmly. "I remember you from the academy. You were always eager to follow orders without questioning their morality." "Morality is a luxury the strong cannot afford," he replied. "Surrender yourself and spare these humans the consequences of their foolish heroics." "These humans have shown me something our people have forgotten," Zarathes said, her voice growing stronger. "They have shown me that love is not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. My child will grow up knowing kindness and compassion. Can you say the same about the children of Velthari?" "Your child will not grow up at all," Kesevarot said flatly. "Nor will these humans if they continue to harbor you." "Then you will have to catch us first," Zarathes replied, and cut the connection. Jake stared at her with new respect. "That was either very brave or very crazy. Perhaps both," she admitted, "but now they know we will not surrender without a fight." The chase continued through the long hours, a deadly game of cat and mouse among the stars. Jake pushed his ship harder than he ever had before, using every bit of speed and maneuverability they possessed. But physics was physics, and the Velthari ship continued to close the distance. 2 hours to human space, Katie announced. Enemy, ship will be in weapons range in 30 minutes. Jake studied the star charts looking for anything that might help. Then he saw it, a small nebula, dense with particles that would interfere with sensors and communications. Change course for the Theta Nebula, he ordered. If we can't outrun them, maybe we can lose them. The New Horizon plunged into the swirling clouds of cosmic dust and ionized gas. The main screen filled with brilliant colors as charged particles danced around the ship. More importantly, their sensors immediately began showing static and interference. They're following us, Sam reported. But their targeting systems should be just as scrambled as ours. Good. That evens the odds a little. Jake gripped his chair as the ship shook from gravitational anomalies within the nebula. Katie, can you find us a path through to the other side? Working on it, Captain. There's a lot of debris in here, and some kind of stellar remnant that's playing havoc with navigation. Behind them, the Velthari ship fired blindly into the nebula, energy beams lighting up the cosmic clouds in brilliant flashes. They were close now, very close, but the interference made precise targeting impossible. There! Katie shouted suddenly. Clear path ahead. Lead straight toward human space. But it's narrow. One wrong move, and we'll hit that stellar remnant. Do it, Jake ordered. The New Horizon threaded the needle between cosmic hazards, racing toward the nebula's edge while energy beams from their pursuer lit up the space around them. Jake held his breath as they cleared the last obstacle and burst out into open space. Human space boundary dead ahead, Katie announced triumphantly. 1 minute. But the Velthari ship had followed them out of the nebula, and it was close enough, now that Jake could see individual weapon ports on its hull. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood outside the medical facility on Haven Colony, pacing like any nervous grandfather-to-be. Through the window, he could see the warm lights of the maternity ward, where Zarathus was bringing her child into the world. Dr. Lisa Carter was inside with the colony's best doctors, making sure everything went smoothly. Sam Rodriguez sat on a nearby bench, his hands clasped together, while Katie Walsh checked her watch for the 100th time in the past hour. They had all requested shore leave to be here for this moment. After everything they had been through together, there was nowhere else they wanted to be. Captain Morrison? A young nurse appeared at the door. Dr. Carter asked me to tell you that everything is going perfectly. It won't be much longer now. Jake nodded his thanks, his heart racing with excitement and worry in equal measure. In the months since they had escaped the Velthari, Zarathus had become more than just a passenger on his ship. She had become family, as real and important to him as any blood relative he had ever had. The door opened again and Lisa emerged with the biggest smile Jake had ever seen on her face. Her medical scrubs were rumpled and her graying hair was messy, but she looked radiantly happy. Congratulations, she announced. It's a healthy baby girl. The crew cheered, drawing curious looks from other people in the waiting area. Jake felt tears prick his eyes, surprising himself with the intensity of emotion. How is Zarathus? Tired but wonderful. She wants to see you all. They followed Lisa through the corridors of the medical facility, past rooms where other families were celebrating new arrivals. The maternity ward felt warm and welcoming, decorated with soft colors and pictures of babies from a dozen different species. Haven Colony had always been a place where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. Zarathus was sitting up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant. Her silver skin seemed to glow with an inner light, and her purple eyes sparkled with joy and pride. In her forearms she held a tiny bundle wrapped in soft pink blankets. "Come meet Lyra," she said softly, her voice full of wonder. Jake approached the bed carefully, hardly daring to breathe. When Zarathus adjusted the blanket so he could see the baby's face, he felt his heart stop for a moment. Lyra was beautiful, in a way that transcended species. She had her mother's silver skin and large eyes, but there was something unmistakably alive and alert about her expression. Her tiny hands had 4 fingers each, and when she yawned, Jake caught a glimpse of her father's gentle features in the shape of her face. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Would you like to hold her?" Zarathes asked. Jake's hand shook slightly as he accepted the precious bundle. Lyra was so small, so fragile, but when she opened her eyes and looked at him, he saw intelligence and curiosity that reminded him of her mother. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "Welcome to the universe." Sam and Katie crowded around, cooing over the baby with the enthusiasm of any proud aunts and uncles. Dr. Lisa checked the monitors one more time, then pulled up a chair beside the bed. "The doctors say she's absolutely healthy," Lisa reported. "All her systems are functioning perfectly, and her brain activity shows excellent development. She's going to be a very smart little girl." "She has to be," Zarathes said, stroking her daughter's tiny hand. "She will grow up between 2 worlds, learning both human and Velthari knowledge. I want her to understand both parts of her heritage." Jake carefully returned Lyra to her mother's arms, watching as Zarathes gazed down at her daughter with infinite love. It was a look he had seen on the faces of countless new mothers over the years, but somehow it seemed even more meaningful here. This child represented hope, proof that love could survive even the cruelest attempts to destroy it. "Have you thought about what you want to do now?" Sam asked gently. "I mean, for the long term?" Zarathes looked up from her baby, her expression thoughtful. "Dr. Martinez from the colony's refugee services spoke with me yesterday. She says there are other exiles here, people from species with rigid social systems who found them too harsh to bear. She thinks I could help them adjust to life in human space." "That sounds perfect for you," Katie said enthusiastically. "You understand what it's like to lose everything and start over. And Haven Colony is a good place to raise a child," Lisa added. "The schools here teach kids to appreciate all different cultures and species. Lyra will grow up knowing that diversity is a strength, not a weakness." Jake watched Zarathes process this information, seeing the hope growing in her eyes. She had been so afraid during her pregnancy that her child would be born into a universe of hatred and fear. Instead, Lyra would grow up surrounded by people who celebrated differences and believed in the power of chosen families. "There's something else," Zarathes said, looking directly at Jake. "Dr. Martinez says that if I want to apply for permanent residency, I need character references from established citizens, people who can vouch for my character and my commitment to human values." "You'll have them," Jake said immediately. "From all of us." "More than that," Sam added. "My family back on Earth, Katie's grandmother, Lisa's daughter, they've all been asking about you. You've got a whole network of people ready to welcome you home." Zarathes began to cry again, but these were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "You humans," she said, shaking her head in amazement. "You take a broken, exiled alien and turn her into family. How do you do it?" "It's not that complicated," Jake replied, settling into a chair where he could watch both mother and baby. "We just see someone who needs love and we love them. Simple as that." A soft knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A tall man in a colony administrator's uniform entered, carrying a tablet and wearing a warm smile. "Ms. Zarathes? I'm Administrator Paul Chen. I wanted to personally welcome you and your daughter to Haven Colony." "Thank you," Zarathes replied, shifting Lyra so she could shake hands properly. "I've been reviewing your application for residency," Chen continued, "and I have to say your references are extraordinary. Captain Morrison and his crew have submitted some of the most glowing character testimonials I've ever read." Jake felt a flush of pride, not in himself, but in his crew. They had all taken time to write detailed letters about Zarathes's courage, intelligence, and dedication to learning human values. It hadn't been a duty for them. It had been an honor. "I'm pleased to inform you that your application has been approved," Chen announced. "Welcome home." The room erupted in celebration, with everyone talking at once and passing baby Lyra around like the precious treasure she was. Jake found himself thinking about the long journey that had brought them all to this moment. From that first desperate pod drifting in space to this warm room full of family and hope. Later that evening, after the excitement had died down and the colony officials had left, Jake sat alone with Zarathes while she nursed Lyra. The baby fed hungrily, making small, contented sounds that seemed to fill the room with peace. "I need to ask you something," Zarathes said quietly. "Something important." "What is it?" "In human culture, when someone saves your life and the life of your child, when they become family to you in the deepest way possible, what do you call that relationship?" Jake thought for a moment. "I guess you'd call them godparents, people who promise to love and protect a child, to be there for them no matter what. Then I want to ask you, Jake Morrison, and Dr. Lisa Carter, and Sam Rodriguez, and Katie Walsh, will you be godparents to my daughter? Will you help me raise her to be strong and kind and brave?" The question hit Jake like a physical blow, overwhelming him with emotion. To be trusted with such responsibility, to be chosen as family by this remarkable woman who had lost everything and still found the courage to hope. It was an honor beyond anything he had ever imagined. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "Of course, yes." The others nodded their agreement, and Jake saw that they were all as moved as he was. They were no longer just a ship's crew who had rescued a stranger. They were a family, bound together by love and choice rather than blood and genetics. As the evening wore on, they took turns holding Lyra and telling her stories about the galaxy she would grow up in. Sam promised to teach her about engineering and how to fix anything that broke. Katie vowed to show her how to navigate by the stars and find her way home no matter how far she traveled. Lisa pledged to teach her about healing and caring for others. And Jake promised to tell her about her parents, about Dexran's courage and Zarathes's strength, and about the love that had brought her into existence despite a universe that tried to prevent it. "What will you tell her about humans?" Zarathes asked as the night grew late. Jake looked around the room at his chosen family, alien and human, bound together by something stronger than biology or law. He thought about the choice they had made to risk everything for a stranger, about the way love had triumphed over fear and logic. "I'll tell her that humans aren't perfect," he said finally. "We make mistakes. We're not the strongest or smartest species in the galaxy. But we have one thing that makes us special. We choose to see the best in each other. We choose to protect the innocent. We choose love over fear, hope over despair, and family over everything else.